he volunteered once to go to bomb or dynamite a bridge. And while he had already dynamited the bridge. And while he was going back in his jeep, the Germans killed him. They caught him and they killed him. So she had a little, the Czech government owed her some favors. So they gave her an apartment in Sudetenland in Teplitz. And she was in touch with us. So I said to my brother and my sisters that I'm going to leave. I don't want to stay here, and I want them to come too.
It took 92 transports to deport the Jewish people of Carpathia and Transylvania to Auschwitz. And from all those transports, that is where the Jewish people went to. And for those selected to live, those who were lucky to pass through the gates of Auschwitz, would end up in other camps throughout Germany and the Sudetenland and Austria, occupied Hungary. And at the end of the war, it would be found out that it was close to 260 labor camps that Jewish people ended up in, from very small to the very large. Now, when the Jewish people came back to their homes, of course, they found their houses ransacked, temples burned or looted, valuables, nothing there whatsoever for them to even bother to stay. And out of a population of hundreds or even thousands, there might be 10 people left, or 20 people, or 5 people. At any rate, one finds that in that region, very high casualties. Something like an average of 90% of all Jewish people were wiped out in that region. Now, in some cities, it might be 80% that were wiped out. And in other cities, and rather, shall we say, in other villages, because in a lot of those small villages, not one Jewish person came back. And we're talking about a 100% kill ratio there. Every Jewish person butchered down to the last one. So when my family came back, I could see that they really didn't want to stay around there. The memories were pretty bad. Their parents and relatives were dead. The people who had helped to deport them, those people were walking the streets freely. Peasants, Hungarian families, Ukrainian peasants, Romanian peasants. So it's like, why bother stay? They figured that in the USA or Canada or Australia or Israel, there will be a place where one can make a new life and not be persecuted by the Gentiles around them. Now, it's interesting that the Czech government had tried to be friends with the Jewish people. They had tried to help the Jewish people in many instances. And this was so after the war, too, because in the Sudetenland, there was a high percentage of German folk there. That is to say, people who had descended directly from German people. And when war had broken out, it's those people that had welcomed the Nazi Party in and had gone about confiscating Jewish property, taking over Jewish homes and stores, as well as taking over Czech people's homes too. So when the war ended, the Czech government took all these Sudetenland Germans and threw them out of the country, forcefully deported them back to Germany, and they offered to Jewish people and to people who had served in the Czech army and their families, they offered them stores and land and homes. And some of my family settled in the Sudetenland in this time period. My Aunt Julia had mentioned that she had a fiancé. He was in the Czech army. When he had passed away, because she was his fiancé, that entitled her to some apartment or land or a home or a store in the Sudetenland. And the Czechs did the best they could to help these people out who were now considered displaced people, refugees in their own country. The situation, though, changed a few years later when the Russians came in, and I mean definitely at that point many people wanted to leave Czechoslovakia, and that's not just Jewish people. We're talking Gentiles and Jewish people who had reasons to not want to live under the Russians. But that would be entirely a different story. It's just enough to say that the Jewish people had suffered quite a bit, and when they came back to their homes, even though they were offered other homes, they just did not want to stay in this region at all any longer. And at this point in time, one finds that the majority of Jewish people left. Recently, in talking with an older gentleman who has been back to the region of Carpathia and Northern Transylvania, traveling through small villages and larger cities, now in 1994, there are no Jews. Not in the small villages anyways, but in some of the larger cities, one found 100 Jews or 50 Jews were left out of once had been a population of who knows how many thousands. So even to this date, people, I mean, never really came back there to settle. And the majority of people that I know, that is in my family and some of their friends who are Holocaust survivors, they don't even want to go back to even look at the place they were from. The suffering was so bad, the hurt so bad, for them to even step foot now in one of these towns.
I just would like to add a few words about my journey from Czechoslovakia into Germany. When I decided to leave Czechoslovakia, it was illegal to leave through regular channels. So we had some Israeli organization which were helping us to go over the border into Germany, into a displaced person camp. This organization was sent from Israel to help all Jewish people who wanted to immigrate to Israel. We had to go first to Germany and to a displaced person camp and get organized to go to Israel. Now, it wasn't just from Czechoslovakia. It was from Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, wherever. Anybody who wanted to go over into the displaced person camp, this organization helped. Now, you couldn't carry too much luggage with you because you had to go through the border, over the mountains, from Czechoslovakia to Germany. So the only thing I took with me was a little suitcase and some kind of a bundle with my necessities, you know, for a few days. I had a little underwear maybe, and shirts and socks and a couple of pair of shoes. And we went to the border, to the Czech and German border, and we got organized there in groups to go over the border. And it was already sometimes late in December, I remember. And it was very cold, and it was snows on the mountain, and we had to go through the border into Germany. So it was a pretty long trip. I don't know how many